On March the 2nd, 2006, around 9:30 at night, Corporal Sergio Pucheta was patrolling the rural area near the town of General Pico on his Honda 150 motorcycle. It was part of his routine as an officer in his division. That night, however, his route wasn't the usual one. One of his colleagues, Marcelo Villegas, had asked him to cover his area because he had the day off. Pucheta agreed and started his patrol at 7:30 in the evening. During his route, he had already covered about 80 kilometers when he reached a place known as Las Cañas Crossing, located about 25 kilometers south of General Pico. There, among the trees in the bush, he noticed something that made him stop. A strange glow lighting up the darkness. Thinking it might be poachers, Pucheta stopped his bike. He turned it off, hung his helmet on the mirror, and started walking around to check the area. However, he didn't hear or see anything unusual. He was about to get back on his motorcycle when suddenly, two intense red lights appeared. They completely blinded him. The lights came from about 50 meters away, and in seconds, they left him frozen. Even though he was 31 years old, in great physical shape, and had recently trained in a special forces course, he didn't have time to react. He didn't even manage to draw his weapon. He stood still by the side of the road, dazzled by the lights. He could only move his hands. A strange tingling sensation ran through his body. A moment later, without knowing how or why, he found himself taking apart his pistol, his handy radio, and his cell phone. He doesn't remember when he did it, nor does he really know why. From that spot, which is in the Darila area, Pucheta managed to call Officer Marcelo Villegas from the 2nd police station, but he doesn't even remember making that call. The first person to answer was Villegas's wife, Norma. She said Pucheta's voice sounded strange, distorted, almost like it wasn't really him. He only asked for her husband and begged her to get to the crossing quickly. At that moment, Villegas was in the shower. The call suddenly dropped, and Norma tried to call Pucheta back, but couldn't reach him. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, Marcelo Villegas answered, and on the other end, he clearly heard Pucheta say, "Come to Las Cañas, you know what's going on." But just after that, the call cut off again. Worried, Villegas dialed the emergency number 101 to report what happened. 10 minutes later, Commissioner Inspector Ayala, head of the radio command unit, arrived at the scene. He was on duty at that time. At the end of a huge cane field, stretching almost 800 meters, they found all of Pucheta's belongings, but there was no sign of him. His motorcycle was lying on its side, resting on the left side. A little further ahead, they found his radio transmitter, a handy talkie, completely taken apart. They also found his service weapon, a 9mm pistol, disassembled into its main parts. The grip, slide, barrel, spring, and safety, along with the magazine and bullets. The strange thing was that the bullets were perfectly stacked upright and neatly arranged, as if someone had carefully placed them there. They also found Pucheta's cell phone, a Nokia with a gray case that had the word police written on it. In short, all his belongings were there, but he seemed to have vanished. Because of how unusual the situation was, a security perimeter was set up right away to protect the area, and all available police vehicles were called in to start searching for the missing officer. Within minutes after the radio patrol unit arrived, Vehicles from different jurisdictions headed out from the crossing in every direction, while a group of officers began searching on foot toward the town of Agustoni. During the search, no signs of a fight or tracks from other vehicles were found. The only trail showed that Pucheta had followed a dirt road called Meridiano Quinto, which marks the border between Buenos Aires and La Pampa. Marcelo Villegas, who arrived at the scene in a vehicle he specifically requested to help with the search, was the one who noticed something strange about the footprints Pucheta had left behind. At first, Pucheta's footprints looked normal, but then the distance between each step started to get bigger. First 1 meter, then 2, and eventually up to 7 meters. It was like someone was lifting him off the ground. This strange pattern went on for almost 2,800 meters. Pucheta said he felt presences around him, like someone was grabbing and throwing him, even though he couldn't see anyone. Marcelo Villegas said at the time, it looked like Pucheta was flying. The last thing they found were some very faint marks made by the tips of his boots, and after that, nothing. Right away, the 4th Criminal and Investigative Court of General Pico, led by Dr. Luis Alberto Abraham, took charge of the case. The file was opened under the label Separadero, which means missing person investigation. It wasn't just the local police involved in the search. Police forces from across the entire province mobilized. The security minister, Dr. Juan Carlos Terno, and police chief Ricardo Bodeau led the joint effort to find the missing corporal under these very strange circumstances. At 2 a.m., a heavy storm hit the area, making the search even more difficult. The next day, March 3, 2006, around 3:55 p.m., Corporal Pucheta was found at a place called El Triangulo, about 15 kilometers southwest of General Pico. This spot was 28 kilometers away from where he had last been seen. The man who found him was the landowner, Luis Alberto Barbero. He said that when he arrived there, he saw a man sitting by the dirt road that runs parallel to Provincial Route 1 and the train tracks. The man was dressed the same as when he disappeared, with his face hidden between his arms. Barbero tried to talk to the officer, but Pucheta didn't respond or say a word. Since he wasn't reacting, Barbero called the emergency number on his cell phone. Within minutes, all the police units in the area arrived, followed by an ambulance and then the media. Pucheta said that inside his mind, something was telling him, if you stay here, we're going to have to come back and find you again. Slowly, he started to regain awareness. When he finally stood up, all he could do was hug his superior, Commissioner Inspector Ayala, and broke down into uncontrollable tears. Barbero, the man who found him, said he didn't see any shoe prints or vehicle tracks where Pucheta was sitting. It was as if someone had simply placed Pucheta there. One curious detail: the night before, it had rained heavily, and according to the police report, the rain stopped around 1:30 p.m. the following day. However, when they found him, the black sweater he was wearing was completely dry. So were his pants. His boots were wet, but not from the rain. They seemed wet, as if he had walked through damp grasslands. Also, there were no burrs or thorns stuck to his clothes, which suggested he had never actually gone into the field. At the hospital, doctors noticed Pucheta had burns on his feet, with blisters that contained tiny dots inside. Throughout his stay, he insisted on being moved to a room without light, as he was suffering from photosensitivity. a condition that lasted for quite a while. An internal inquiry and an official investigation were launched. Finally, in May 2013, through Resolution 383 published in the Official Gazette, Pucheta was discharged and forcibly retired, as he was never able to return to work due to the trauma caused by that experience. The disappearance of Corporal Pucheta remains a true mystery. Everything that happened fits with what is commonly described as an abduction, something that has been talked about extensively over the years. Pucheta has occasionally shared vague memories from that night. He says he saw the fields from above, as if he were inside some kind of vehicle or craft, and everything around him was glowing as it moved. He also remembers that whenever he touched the ground with his feet, he felt intense heat. He himself says he never wants to go through anything like that again, and to this day, he avoids going near the Cañas crossing because that's where he lived an experience he simply cannot explain.